Negative gearing changes. It's in the news again, 2024. And we're going to be talking about in this video why the government are potentially looking at implementing changes, what it could mean to you, and what it's likely to lead to from here. So if you're wanting to know more, make sure you stick around. Guys, my name's Julian. I'm the head of strategy here at Ripehouse. And in today's video, we're going to be unpacking, potentially some of the changes that the federal government are considering at the moment when it comes to negative gearing and what that entails to more so property investing and what it's likely to lead to and the impact of the flow and effect from those changes going on. So I guess if you're unfamiliar with what negative gearing actually is as a concept, it's a way essentially to claim some of your losses back. So, if you've got running costs on a property, let's just say, it's really simple terms, you've got a property and it essentially loses you money. So to operate that cost from your rates, water, insurances, property management fees, interest, if all of those fees put together are greater than the income you're generating, you're at a negative loss. So it's what's called negative gearing. So it allows us essentially to take your income and reduce your tax bill. So if you've lost $10,000, the taxman will say, that's terrible. I'm sorry to hear about that. And they'll allow you to claim some losses back. It's known as negative gearing. Now, I guess this is not uncommon. We've seen this in the past. So we've had this is just kind of kicked off. I think it was probably September, where the current Prime Minister Albanese was questioned about what potential changes they're alluding to. And he mentioned that the federal budgeting has been running some modelling on some changes to negative gearing, and it's really kind of flagged alarm bells to investors out there. But I think it's one of those things that for people who are in the property space all the time, or particularly the news in that space, this isn't new. Each and every year, whether it's once or twice a year, sometimes more. This is an article from a year ago. This happens all the time. It's a great kind of clickbait type article where there's nothing. Negative gearing, house prices rising and falling, interest rates, they're kind of the news media repeat and rinse. Just keep printing stories about that and it'll generate interest. So it's not something that's new, but I guess it's just something that we need to be considerate of and to understand why potentially the government is considering it right now. It's quite a lot of revenue being lost at the moment. So got some figures here. So if we look in 2021, 2022, the loss of revenue for the federal government was about $2.5 billion in terms of what they had to give back. And the reason we can see in 2023, 2024, it jumped up to 3.2 and it's forecast at the moment to be about 5.7 billion. The reason there's been such a big jump is because we've gone from, next to zero interest rates of 0.1% cash rate we're at a period of time and now we're in the fours. And from an actual interest rate perspective, it's about a 6.5 for most loans at the moment. So that's a cost where they're worrying, that's going to get bigger and bigger over time. So they're thinking, well, hang on, are we losing a lot of revenue here? But I think it's really important to understand why the government won't necessarily act too quick to scrap this. They're running some modelling and seeing, if they can make some changes, how can they claw back some of that revenue? Because making those changes can have some pretty dramatic impacts on a flow and effect in terms of what happens through the property cycle. So I guess one of the things it's well understanding the property space is if you're a politician and you're getting absolutely hammered about housing crisis, property prices, affordability, there's no better way. It's media 101. Rather than take ownership, you deflect, right? And it's much easier to point the fingers at investors because essentially they're nameless. So it's a great way to go about it, but it's also understanding, the flow and effects if you remove it. So one of the things you're going to understand here, the impacts that you'll see if negative gearing is changed, it will have a dramatic effect on housing supply. So unlike other countries around the world, a lot of the rental property in Australia, so 80% of rental properties in Australia is actually done through private investment. So though we do have government housing across the country, it's less than 20%. So we're relying on mum and dad investors to a large extent to actually create rental properties. So if you remove that incentive, you'll actually take a lot of rental properties out of the market. And it's economics 101 really here. So less rental properties will then see increased pricing on the rental side. And it's also understanding that less supply as well, because a lot of the investment is creating homes to begin with. So if there's less homes being built because it doesn't yield a good return, there'll be less homes built, which then increases house pricing. So when you understand that a third of the population is renting, a third of the population has a mortgage, and another third of the population has no mortgage, you're essentially going to disrupt 2/3 of the population by making such a big change. So you're either going to increase their rents or you're going to increase their mortgages to a degree. So understand there's going to be a bigger flow-on effect from that as well. But then also there will be, I guess, they don't want to make it that it's unaffordable for you to get to retirement and you don't have your funds there. So in general, the government wants you to be a self-funded retiree. It's really a lot of money and expenditure to have people on the pension for their entire life, healthcare and all those associated costs, things like NDIS, care packages to stay at the home. The reason those programs exist is it's because it actually reduces the spend by getting them into more so in the private sector or paying that for them forever, right? So they want to see a lot of people be self-refunded retirees. And a lot of people do that through property investing. They buy a house, they use it potentially to pay off their mortgage quicker, they use it to grow their super or just grow their net wealth and ideally get to be to a point where they're a self-funded retiree. So the government actually wants that. What they don't want, however, is they don't want to have a system in place where people are kind of milking it and just getting further and further ahead, where the average Joe is just getting further and further behind. So it's a really delicate balancing act to make sure it's a system that's equitable for everybody, but doesn't affect, I guess, the greater good of our tax system. The tax system is really there to help pay for education, healthcare, all those kind of really critical, important services. So what we would be likely to see, I guess, if there were changes, is that we might go to the very top end. So the government has already recently proposed some changes in the super space where if you've got $3 million or more in your super, that potentially you're going to lose that 15% concession there where you'll go up to a 30% bracket. And I guess common sense would say there, well, if you've got $3 million in your super, you can probably afford to pay that little bit extra it comes at tax time. So if there was some change, I guess my predictions would be that they would more so go to the top end. What they don't want is someone in the northern beaches of Sydney who's got a $10, $20, $30 million property and they're, it's at a 1 or 2% yield and they're negative gearing that in the millions, right? So if they were to claw back some of their lost revenue, they might go to that extreme top end of town or put a bit of a cap in terms of how much you can actually claim through negative gearing, but it would be too much of a dramatic impact in terms of the housing market and also, disincentivize creating a lot of self-refunded retirees. So that's going to be a big one. And then I guess the other one to understand is we're coming up to an election year next year. So I think it's Bill Shorten, who's we go back in prior years, he lost the unlosable election to ScoMo, I think it was at the time. So he kind of went down that negative gearing path and he ended up losing that. It was probably off the back of pressing that negative gearing, negative gearing policy. So I don't see it happening. I just can't really see it from here. But if there were to be some changes, it would be more that top end of town where they might look to claw back. And I think what you'd see if they did go down that pathway, you're only affecting a minority of the population. Your mum and dad investor who has 1, 2, 3 properties, they're not as impacted. They're fine with it. Your lower end of town, which maybe suffering from an affordability crunch, they're probably pretty happy. They feel that the rich are being taxed more and being taken care of. So if there were changes, that would be it. But I think coming up into an election year, they might just go, hang on, this has already caused a bit of a stir. Let's just pull right back and get everybody back on our side. So that's where I'm saying, I hope you found today's video helpful. If you do have any questions, make sure you click the link below. We can book a call to either myself or someone on our team. More than happy to talk about, I guess, your property questions, whether it be about negative gearing or what else you're looking to do in the property investing space. If you haven't already, make sure you've hit that like button and subscribe, and we will catch you on the next one. Bye for now.